Anything I should know about? Anybody eat a cicada lately?
Mm-mm.
My dogs have been apparently back at home.
My dog
Yes, it is
also has
Yeah.
been having a great time.
My mom says that she like can't take them on walks because they're just crunching and munching every time she goes out.
I think I saw a cicada a mate.
Yeah, me too. I took a
Yeah.
walk around Bolton Hill, and under one specific tree, there was thousands of them, like in the tree and dead on the ground. But some of them were like stuck together at the back, and I was like, "Oh God, I shouldn't be looking at this. I'm sorry, guys."
No, it was like right in front of my window, and I was like, why?
Well, when you
I just
do,
realized they make different sounds at night. Wait, what?
Just said that they're exhibitionists, the cicadas.
Yeah.
Oh God.
My dog doesn't eat bugs, but in like the evening, I don't know if you guys live in the city, but like anywhere in the city in the evening, like there will be cockroaches on the ground. Like that's what they do. They come out at night and they eat all of the food and shit up off the ground. But my cat likes to go into the backyard and like hunt all the cockroaches.
Oh,
He doesn't really eat them. Like he just catches them,
Snacks them
kills
around.
them, and then throws them away. But he likes it. It's fun for him. So
whenever my cat finds a bug, she like kind of just bats it around and looks at it, and like it starts crawling away, and she smacks it with her paw and like sniffs it, but she doesn't eat it.
yeah, that's what he does too.
I wish she
Same.
did,
I have
though,
to
'cause I don't
ask
like
my
coming
cat
back.
for permission. I tell her like, "Can you please kill it?" And then the next time she kills it.
amazing. She listens to you. That's great. My chickens don't listen to me at all. They are loving cicadas. So good. Here's what we're going to do today. We are going to talk about Kant's critique of judgment, which I warned you would be a test. It's difficult, challenging, but it's really hard to overestimate the importance of this text and the influence of it. When we cut through his terminology, I hope you'll see the importance of what he's saying about beauty and the aesthetic experience. And I happen to like what his argument here. For many years, I was not a fan of Kant, but I've started to appreciate him more and more. And I do think he's one of the more profound philosophers in the West. I'll talk about him shortly, though. I wanted to go over, as promised, I wanted to make sure we understood the end of the symposium. I just want to go over that final speech with Alcibiades. So if you have your text handy, please pull that up. On Wednesday, I was giving you all these questions about, Plato's intentions. To be an artist is to make decisions. When you are a writer, you make decisions about what you put together and the form and the style and the narration. And it's very curious that Plato, several decisions about the Symposium are very curious. Why he writes this from, the point of view of a guy who heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy who was at a party and was drunk. And then when we get to the speech of Socrates, he takes us to a further level of remove from immediate, presence by citing a story of Diotima, right? Well, why does he do that? Why does he introduce Alcibiades at the end, who is not part of the party, but he's an outsider and interloper. And he, although he's younger, should be the beloved, he is the lover. He is the pursuer of Socrates, the older man, which has inverted the traditional, the romantic traditions of ancient Athens. And then, of course, why does Alcibiades decide that he's going to, instead of giving a speech in praise of love, he gives a speech in praise of Socrates, which, as we'll notice in a second, not very praiseworthy. Of course, is following on Socrates' speech, where he doesn't really praise love either. And then the question I've asked for you all to write about, if you choose to write about it on the essays, is, what is the point of Alcibiades' speech? Why does it? What is its meaning, and why does it follow on the speech of Socrates? What is Plato trying to get across? So why don't we broach some of those issues today? Before we do, I'm just going to recall what Plato has to say about the speech of Socrates. So, we have seen several speeches so far about love. We saw the speech of Phaedrus, where he talks about an army of lovers. It was, love is a great bond for an army. We poked some holes in that. He talks about Aristophanes. There's Aristophanes' speech, which is the story of the origin of love. Love is an attempt to heal the wound in our nature. We just talked about that last week, and the idea of a soulmate, and we critique the idea of a soulmate. And then there's the speech of Agathon, which is short and sweet, but also kind of interesting, where he personifies love and says, "Love does make poets of us all." I believe that's a quote from Shakespeare, but that's essentially the point that Agathon makes, right? Love inspires poetry. Love inspires art and creativity. Agathon's speech seems, it's true that when you're in love, or as someone pointed out, breaking up, that does inspire you people to be, I guess, to write poems and songs and whatever, but it's not always good, right? In fact, it's often not good. I wrote crap poetry that I would be embarrassed for anyone to ever lay their eyes on when I was your age, going through breakups. Never have I behaved in such an embarrassing manner as during a breakup, so I don't want any record of it at all. And, so basically, Agathon, I love you, but you're full of shit, Yes, love inspires people to be creative, but it doesn't always inspire good creativity. It inspires a lot of shite. And so it's interesting, Socrates comes along at this point and says, well, I think it's fitting he comes after Agathon's speech saying, look, I thought we were all giving speeches in praise of love, but I thought they were supposed to be truthful, right? And that's a big dig at Agathon, who he senses is full of shit. And so Socrates is going to give a speech in praise of love that is truthful. And by way of doing that, his big contrast is, listen, Agathon, you say that love is young, the youngest of the gods, the happiest, the most joyous. Why? Because when people are in love, they are all of those things. By contrast, Socrates says, no, love is in need. Love does not have. Love is in pursuit. Love is a kind of emptiness and yearning for what? For beauty. And if we're going to personify love, as he does through the speech of Diotima, who is this mysterious person introduced by Plato, supposedly taught Socrates the art of love. And Diotima tells him that if we're going to personify love, love is not a god at all, but some kind of spirit between the mortal realm and the immortal realm, and always hungering and like poor and rough and in need, So a very different characterization of love from all the others. Good. And then he tells us, very, very important point is that, one of the key byproducts of love, of course, is reproduction, right? Diotima says, says that this drive to reproduce suggests that there is a yearning for immortality lurking within the drive for love. In other words, what is love? Love is a secret, yearning for immortality. And as we discussed the other day, I don't think it necessarily has to be spelled out through reproduction itself. But I think, as we will see, beauty itself is an ideal form, according to Plato. So to pursue beauty, to fall in love with beauty, is itself to be pursuing immortality. That's the point we need to take up through this. I was suggesting the other day where Freud talks about unconscious drives, like in the id. We are in Freud's big claims we are unconsciously driven by the urge for sex, and that leads us to do all kinds of crazy things we're not aware of. We're not fully aware that sex is driving us to do them. There's something similar here in that what the drive for love is all about, according to Plato, is really a secret yearning for immortality. And it just plays itself out in a different way. At which point we get this thing called the ascent of love. This is around line 210. Line 210. We begin, and most people don't get past this point of loving. He says we start with loving one body. Maybe we could read that as one person. And then from there, we go to love the beauty in all bodies. From there, we love souls. And from there, we love the beauty of what organizes souls, which would be laws. Sounds strange, but that's the point. And then ideally or hopefully, eventually, we would rise to perceiving beauty itself, which this is line 211, which is a very important point for Plato, but it is very curious. What does beauty itself look like? I was trying to explain the other day how Plato understands his forms. Mortal things, physical things, share in a form. Baltimore, to the extent that it is just or has justice. Hello? Does anybody have a question? Okay. Beauty, to the extent that it has, Baltimore, to the extent that it has justice or exhibits justice, even in some small degree, it shares in or it imitates that form of justice. And things that are beautiful, like I see a beautiful tree outside, that shares in or emulates the form of beauty according to Plato. There is a single, universal, eternal form. Everything that is beautiful shares in that or participates in that form to some degree. But he's talking about the ascent of love. We would see, but and this is a point we'll see in Kant today. We generally, you and me, we're all normal human beings. We tend to see beauty always instantiated in things. We will see beauty in a tree or a flower or a person, or maybe a beautiful cat. I don't know, or a beautiful house. He's talking about beauty itself in the abstract. And that seems very strange. But what do we see in this ascent? What we see in this ascent is a migration from loving the physical steadily upward to the intellectual. And when you've reached the realm of forms, then you have reached the realm of the immortal, according to him, because those forms, they are eternal, but physical things are not. So our innate drive or yearning for immortality secretly aims at the forms. And in this case, it will lead us to the form of beauty. Love will lead us to the form of beauty. I guess the question would be, how do you, we can talk about this, how do you make this ascent of love if most people do not get past the first step? How do you make that ascent? I'm going to pause there for a second, see if anybody has any questions. I see you, McShafe. Yeah. I've often wondered, so the various steps, you have love of one body. Oops. Then you have love of all bodies, which sounds weird. When I hear, and I want to dwell on love of all bodies for a second. When I hear love of all bodies, I hear Buddhist compassion. And I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Buddhism, but in Christianity, the distinctive love is agape, or love of neighbor. In Buddhism, the distinctive love is compassion. And what does compassion mean? For the Buddhists, it means to love all things, to love all creation. It can be controversial, though, because as the Buddha has it, you do not love your spouse or your child specifically. You share your love with and for all things. So it's a kind of detached love. The goal of Buddhism is detachment. So, and it's often described as a kind of universal love. I'm not sure what that means, Emerald.
It means like thinking as a whole, like there's a lot of people, but together we are similar, essentially. That's more or less like the dumbed down version of it.
Yeah, sure. Good. Yeah, and in Buddhist compassion, there's supposed to be the realization that we all share an essential nature, that we have
Yeah.
everything and much in common. So that's one way I try to make sense of what he means, right? Your love with Plato, you're moving beyond exclusive or exclusionary love. Like, as I said last week, Freud points out that romantic love is exclusive or exclusionary, and actually Freud says it's antisocial in that regard. And what the transfer, this ascent that Plato characterizes, you're moving from a love of single to a love of many. And that does sound like a kind of spiritual love that you hear in the various religions. And then from there, love of soul, you start to love what lies beyond the physical, behind the physical in people. And then from there, and for the Greeks, soul equals psyche. And psyche is really another term for mind, right? Their notion, when you hear the Greeks talk about soul, don't think of a Christian soul necessarily, Judeo-Christian soul. Don't think of those terms. It's more like it's the principle of life. It's this spiritual drive that moves us. And then from there, it's love of soul, and then love of laws. McShafe would like to know more about that, and I'm not really sure. Let's see what line that is. That's McShafe, do you have the line number? Hello? No? Okay. I think it's somewhere around 210. Yeah, 210C. That's where he mentions this love of laws. And it's true, he doesn't really say much about that. I think I think really what Plato has in mind is, laws. Laws shape the soul, but laws are also eternal. At least the laws of nature are, and
So they're not talking about like legislation. They're talking about like immutable facts.
well, we use what I was about to say, Joey, is we use the word laws to talk about civil laws and laws of nature alike. And the point being that, of course, civil laws can be changed, but our intent is that they should endure and that they should be firm and fixed.
And isn't that more based on the form of justice though? Like instead of like an actual law, like aren't they more just trying to emphasize the form of justice? Like the forms you were talking about, not like a general form.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but laws are not forms according to Plato. Justice is, you're right. Laws would direct us to that form.
So wouldn't the form be the immortal part then, not the laws? Because I mean, the laws, like you said, they have to change at certain points in order
Well,
to
what I was going to say is there's something immortal about them, or there's something, at least something enduring, right? We're getting closer and closer. I mean, technically speaking, for Plato, souls, I was struggling with whether I should say souls are immortal, but I don't think for Plato they are. If you saw the book of at the end of the Republic, the myth of he talks about a kind of regeneration of the souls, kind of rebirth. But whether this is to say that they are eternal, I'm not sure. We're progressing closer and closer to the unquestionably immortal, according to him, which for him is going to be the forms.
Were they of the mind that like souls were just like sitting around waiting to be born? Or like it sounds like you're saying that they were like recycled, but in his
Well, that's how he puts it in the myth of you depending on how you live your life, you choose your next one, right? And you could choose well or poorly. That's how the myth of depicts it. But we don't know if Plato really believed that, right? Plato is one of the big debates about Plato is what he believed about the afterlife or about the gods. I think it's pretty clear he was skeptical. He's definitely not down with the organized religion of his day, but he had to be very careful about what he said or else he'd be killed or chased out of Athens. But
yeah, it seemed like he was almost like slyly criticizing a lot of like the holy people in that state about justice, like how they just kind of pretend that they are.
sure, yeah, I think so. I think he is, and notice there's no priestly class in the classes of the Republic, which is kind of a strange omission. But I think the point all I want to make is that we're getting closer and closer to the immortal through the ascent of love, until finally, if we reach that pinnacle, and who can do that? This is presumably it's going to be very rare. If you are to reach the pinnacle, the ascent of love, you will be released into the realm of pure forms. You will behold beauty itself, in itself, incorporeal, or I should say, not instantiated in any one thing. Again, when you see beauty itself, you're not seeing beauty in a tree or beauty in a person or beauty in a house. You're seeing beauty itself, which, as we'll see, Kant rejects. He doesn't understand how that's possible. But this is Plato.
So is that supposed to be a kind of insinuation of like, not possession, but like attribution? Like when he says he's seeing beauty, not the beauty of the person, he's just seeing beauty generally. Like that form is like inhabiting that person or that object.
Well, that's how we see it in the physical world. Like, as I was saying, all of us here in this class, we're all normal, fallible human beings. We will see beauty in a tree or in a person or in a house or in a cake. I don't know. He's talking about this rare person making the ascent of love, seeing it unincorporated into any given thing, but just beauty itself. And I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah, that's actually really kind of stumping for me.
It's weird. It's strange, to say the least. And a lot of people had trouble with this conclusion of Plato. But I think the big picture is he wants to say love is this urge driving us to the immortal. And love ideally should transform into an intellectual ascent. That's what it should. It too often gets bogged down in the physical. We see that in Plato. There were a couple other speeches we didn't look at where they meant this point. I believe the doctor, Eric Zamakis, makes this point. The upshot I was indicating to you is that for Plato, beauty is objective. So what I mean by objective is it's real. It's not subjective. It's really there. It's really there it is really there in a thing. It is a property of a thing. Oh God, I'm sending this all just to Jordan. Hey, Jordan.
I was gonna say I'm not getting any of that.
Thanks.
Stupid chat. Let me try it again. Beauty is objective, which means to say that it is the property of an object. God damn it, my typing.
We're talking about Kant right now, right?
No, this is Plato. This is Plato. And beauty is universal and eternal, which is to say, when I say something is beautiful, I mean it as a fact. That's how Plato sees this. Beauty is factual, just like justice is fact. Baltimore is a just city. Trees are beautiful. Those are factual statements according to Plato. And beauty is universal. It's the same for anybody, for everyone. So therefore, if you're not perceiving beauty, presumably there's something wrong with you. Kant is going to say it's subjective. And his position gets a lot more nuanced than that. Any other questions before I dive into the speech of Alcibiades? McShafe, I think he means laws of men, because I think it's what shapes souls. But what I was trying to say about laws is that human laws, we call them laws, just like laws of nature. Laws in society, they attempt to emulate laws in nature. How so? Well, just like the law of gravity determines how motion is conducted in nature, so traffic laws, for example, are supposed to conduct human activity in society, right? They're supposed to be firm and fixed. Now, of course, they can be subject to change, unlike the law of gravity. But what I'm trying to say, McShafe, is about civil laws, human laws, is that we emulate the lawfulness of nature. And in some cases, human laws really do endure for a very long time. Anybody else? Any other questions about the Socrates and the ascent of love? All righty, let's get into Alcibiades. So Alcibiades shows up and he says, I think he says, hello, gentlemen, I am shit-faced, something like that. And he sits down and then doesn't realize he's sitting next to Socrates, and then starts cursing himself and everybody. Why am I next to Socrates? He's tricked me again. And he reveals that he's kind of infatuated with Socrates. And there sparks are flying, at least in one direction. The men invite Alcibiades to take part. in their conversation and give a speech. And he says, I will do it, but I'm not going to give a speech to love, praise of love. I'm going to give a speech in praise of Socrates. And I'd asked a question a minute ago, does it sound like a speech of praise to you? Alcibiades has a lot of complaints, you know. He sounds often like a spurned and jealous lover. And what's really strange, line 215b, he describes Socrates like a satyr. And a satyr, as I was indicating to you last week, satyrs were pretty common features in ancient Greek tragedies. They showed up as comic relief, half man, half goat, I believe, typically with a giant phallus protruding in front of them as they loped around the stage. Everybody would have a good chuckle. A satyr were supposed to be, what's BDE? Hello?
It means big D energy.
Okay, thank you. I
It
shouldn't
was
have,
a joke. I'm sorry.
shouldn't have asked. Anyway, yes, the answer is yes, Joey. And satyrs were famously like rapacious and hungry and horny, you know, and insatiable. And so it's really weird to, and bawdy. And so it's strange. He says that Socrates is like a satyr, which is strange because Socrates is not like that really, or the characterization is that he's not. Like, he's the one who's kind of cool and aloof to all of Alcibiades' outreaches, we can see, right? And yet there's a supposition here that Socrates indeed is gripped with a kind of desire, but maybe it's not the kind of desire we're used to seeing like in a satyr, right? Maybe his desire has transformed into something else. He says that Socrates has a very particular effect on him. There's a quote on line 216b, putting it in the chat. He says, Socrates is the only man in the world who makes me feel shame. He makes me feel ashamed. I know perfectly well that I can't prove he's wrong when he tells me what I should do. But the moment I leave his side, I go back to my old ways. I cave into my desire to please the crowd. My whole life has become one constant effort to escape from him, that is Socrates, and keep away. But when I see him, I feel deeply ashamed because I'm doing nothing about my way of life that I've already agreed with him that I should. Sometimes I think I'd be happier if he were dead, and yet I know that if he dies, I'll be even more miserable. I can't live with him, and I can't live without him. Right? Just like sounds just like a lover. What is shame? That word comes up a couple times here. Socrates makes Alcibiades filled with shame when he sees Socrates. What is shame? How would you
It's like
describe
a painful self-realization of like,
I like it. Painful self-realization. When you say, maybe to your pet, your dog or cat, or if your parents say to you, you should be ashamed, what does that suggest?
that you're not like considering things. Sorry, Shark. You
Okay. I was gonna say that you should feel bad for what you've done. You should realize what you did and how bad it is that you did it.
Good.
I feel like it's also kind of like them trying to point out like a fallacy in your thought process. Like, hey, like you're not thinking. You're not taking things into consideration.
Good.
It's not like a permanent thing. Like that's the one thing I think about shame. It's like not something you have to feel forever, or like something that people are trying to make you feel forever. It's just kind of like a social pressure or like a self pressure to be like better.
Shame is not guilt, for example. Right. Anybody else want to add to that? You should be ashamed. What does that suggest? What does that indicate? Maybe what follows? You should be ashamed. What's the next statement you might hear?
Be better.
Be better. Does it suggest you know better?
I think so, in a sense. It's supposed to be like a kind of sense of disappointment as well. Like you're not living up to your expectations or the expectations that have been set for you by other people or by
It's
yourself.
like, yeah, it's like you know better not to do that, but you keep doing it. So it's like you should be ashamed for going against something you know is wrong.
Good, and I think that's an important point here for Alcibiades. He knows better. He pretty much says it. Like, I know what I should do, but I can't help myself. I go back to my old ways of pleasing the crowd instead of, getting my life in order, and caring about what is essential, what is important. Good. So then Alcibiades tells a story about Socrates and himself. Maybe we should call it a date, I think. I really wanted to give everybody a chance to talk about it on Wednesday, since you guys are already talking about the beginning of class. What do you all remember about the date between Alcibiades and Socrates? What goes on in that date?
Well, isn't Alcibiades like trying to seduce Socrates, but Socrates is completely just off in another planet, like just very clueless about what's going on. And he actually is like, I'm angry at him, but I admire him for being so unbelievably stubborn and resilient. Like no one's been able to resist me, but he was able to.
Isn't it also about like more than the physical seduction as well, though? Like that's the issue for him, is that like he can physically seduce Socrates. Like he's gotten him into bed, but like they can't connect on an intellectual or emotional level, and he feels like less than because of it.
Good. Yeah. Good. Anybody else? What you remember of their date? Anybody remember what I don't know, people like for dates? What do people do for dates now? I guess we can't go to the movies, right? Maybe go
Zoom dates are a thing.
Zoom
apparently.
dates. Oh, I'm hurting inside just hearing it.
I know it's my generation that's doing it too. It's not like younger people or like your generation. It's my generation. They're like, hey, let's do Zoom dates. And I'm like, that sounds awful.
Yeah, I mean, you can go
just go to a
somewhere
rage room.
outside. Like me and my
Like a rage
girlfriend,
room.
we go on like we don't really go on dates, but when we want to just like not hang out in my apartment all day, we like go down to the Inner Harbor or Fells Point or something and just hang out there and do whatever.
Did Joe mention a rage room? Is that what I heard?
Oh.
What is
Yeah,
that?
you can just like go to you could like you smash cards, and you could like throw a like microwave across the room or put a sledgehammer through it. Or,
Yeah,
like,
they have
put
things
the
where you
whole
pay money to go into these places where they have like stuff that's been donated or was thrown away, and then you get various items like a baseball bat or something, and you just smash things.
There's one in Baltimore.
This
There
is
is.
like a people date. Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, you
It's
could.
actually pretty popular.
It sounds pretty fun.
Meg says there's no dates, only hanging.
Mm.
Is that because of COVID or just in general?
I think
Yeah, I mean,
the
dates
culture. When
where
am
you're
I-
going out, like doing things like going to the movies, going to a fancy dinner. I mean, that's not really like you can do that, but that's not really like the standard now.
Yeah, who's gonna take me to a fancy dinner?
I'm like, oh, I'm sorry I made you pay money because we're both like minimum wage jobs and we're both
So,
broke.
well, then
Like,
I have a question for you all. I'm kind of curious. What do Micah dates look like? I mean, are they? I mean, we have a rage room suggestion
Micah dates.
or harbor.
Go to your person you're dating's dorm and awkwardly sit there while their roommate's next to you.
Food Market. Where's that? Joe, is that the one in Hamden?
Yeah, food markets in Hamden. It's like, I mean, yeah, if you go there on a date, you're definitely spending over $100 like easy.
But there's also places like the Crown, which is opening back up, which is like drinks and stuff and has karaoke sometimes, but then also food. But that is like one of the places where if you go, you'll see like everybody that goes to Micah and
That's-
the Tab too. So that's
Where is
Are your exes
I've
are
never even heard of it.
yeah, they're all
your exes are at the Crown. Okay.
yeah.
I have been to the Crown. I know the Crown.
Where is it?
Maybe you've seen my exes. Where is it?
Probably.
It's like by the Lazarus Center.
It's like 21st Street in Charles.
It's on the corner next to the Micah Film Center.
Yeah. So,
Station North, right?
all right, what is Alcibiades' great plan for their date night? Where does he take Socrates, everybody? Anybody remember?
I forgot. I know they eventually go back to his house.
They did. They go back to his place, but first they go to the gym.
Oh yeah, and they wrestle, right?
They go to the gymnasium, which is a Greek word. I don't know what it means. I forget. And they
I
wrestle.
actually will
Thank
say
you. What would you say, Joey?
that is like the gay date, apparently.
Oh, I'm not done. I'm
fit
not
in that.
done. They go to the gymnasium and they wrestle. Does anybody know how the ancient Greeks used to wrestle?
Naked.
Naked
Sweaty,
and
oily.
oiled. Why were you oiled?
So it's
To make it more
harder.
difficult to wrestle.
Thank you. So date number 1, naked and oiled and wrestling. That is
But that is
my-
actually like the gymnasium, like the gym, like going to lift weights. Like I've had so many dudes like ask if I want to go on a gym date. And I'm like, no, that doesn't sound fun. Like you're just gonna hear me heavily breathing the whole time.
Okay. All right. I hear you. Well, I think you'll appreciate how Plato puts this. This is line 217C. Actually, I hope it's not just in my translation, but some of the words are very tongue-in-cheek. My next idea, this is Alcibiades, was to invite him to the gymnasium with me. We took exercise together, and I was sure this would lead to something. He took exercise and wrestled with me many times when no one else was present. There's nobody around. They're naked, oiled. What can I tell you? I got nowhere. When I realized my ploy had failed, I decided on a frontal attack. Boom, boom, right? I refused to retreat from battle. He's a general, don't forget. Alcibiades. I refused to retreat from a battle I myself had begun. I need to know where matters stood. So what I did was I invited him to dinner as if I were his lover and he my young prey, right? Again, the roles are reversed. He's trying to seduce. Anyway, I just think that's very funny. And then he brings him to dinner. He drinks, he gets some food and drink. He persuades Socrates to spend the night. Socrates decides to. Nothing happens. He can't get any action. And finally says to Socrates, breaks down and like, Socrates, I give you everything. You can have anything you want. Just take it. And Socrates says this on line 218E. 218E. Dear Alcibiades, if you are right in what you say about me, you're already more accomplished than you think. If I really have in me the power to make you a better man, right, then you can see in me a beauty that is really beyond description and makes your own remarkable good looks pale in comparison. Right? Alcibiades is famously handsome. Socrates is not. He's famously ugly, according to Nietzsche, at least. But then, is this a fair exchange you propose? You seem to me to want more than your proper share. You offer me the merest appearance of beauty, and in return, you want the thing itself, gold in exchange for bronze. What you're offering me, in other words, I don't want. And I'm not sure you want it either. That's Socrates' message to Alcibiades, right? You only know how to give yourself to me physically, but I think you want more, and I definitely want more. Joey, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I think you kind of like covered what I was going to ask about, because it kind of felt like when I was reading it, like it was kind of a backhanded compliment, but or like a not even like a almost an attack on his person as
And he's like, you're hot,
again,
but that's all you got. You're a
yeah,
handler.
exactly. He's like, yeah, you got a bod, but you got no brain.
I think he's a little more, that's definitely there, but I think he's a little more complimentary in that, saying like, you know, you want more than that too, right? The problem is, here's the problem. Alcibiades, like most people, I presume, you know, they own, or many people, I should say, they only know how to, maybe I should say most, but many people like Alcibiades, they only know how to love in this way. And Socrates' message is, you want more, and I want more, and I know it, but you need to come to that realization. And you want, and Socrates' message to Alcibiades is, you want more from me. You see more that you want from me. You see the intellectual value there, and the worth and the ascent, but you're dwelling on the physical. And Alcibiades, as a result, you know, being spurned, this makes him admire him even more. And he wants Socrates even more, right? So, good. So, let me see. Let me pause there for a second, see if anybody has any questions about the speech of Alcibiades. What do you have to say to some of my questions about this speech? What is the point of this speech?
I think it's to further the point that love is not just aesthetic attraction, it is also intellectual attraction. It's to like prove a real life example that people want a connection of like thoughts and stuff as well as beauty. And that thoughts are very important to bring to a relationship. So I guess it's another one of Plato's like, oh, here's a real life example to show that it's actually a thing and not just something I'm blabbering about.
All right, Joey.
I kind of read it like, you say you want love, but you don't even know what love is. Like he's trying to tell the audience and the people there, like Plato's trying to say, like, I don't think that these people really do know what love is, even though he had them speak on like an excess on it. Like that's supposed to be like the ending of the statement of the whole conversation is like, you guys say you know what love is, but you don't.
My boyfriend, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but not really. My boyfriend was talking to me about, because his dad is also a philosophy, not a professor, but he studied a lot in philosophy. And in turn, my boyfriend got a lot of philosophical discussions and stuff when he was a kid up to now. And he was saying, my boyfriend was saying that it's like a quote unquote conspiracy theory or a theory or whatever, that Socrates didn't actually exist. And it was a character that Plato came up with, which I kind of believe because of, you know, this guy said it from this guy, because people are more likely to believe something you say if you say that someone else said it.
Oh.
So maybe if Plato like was like, oh, if I'm saying that this really smart guy is saying all this stuff, then people are more likely to believe it if it was just saying my brain, that's me saying it to them. Like, why would they take my word? Like that kind of thing. I don't know if it's true, but I thought that was
well, the only wrench in that theory is what McShafe says in the chat here, that there was another author who wrote about Socrates as the main character named
What if they're
Xenophon, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
his.
a good.
And then we also have, I mentioned to you all that Aristophanes also has a depiction of Socrates in one of his plays. So Socrates was.
But like so many people have written about, Zeus and the gods, but like, I
Maybe they
mean,
were
their
all-
constructs and their
yeah.
their ideas are real, but like we can't
Maybe
prove
they're
that
all
they were physics.
friends, and they're like, let's write about this Socrates guy, even though he doesn't exist. Maybe he's a person that we use as a kind of a example of our ideas in real life.
That's so interesting.
I don't know, just a theory.
Well, no, what I will say is this Char is, I mean, scholars believe he exists. The problem is we don't really know what he thought. We don't really know what he said. Across the corpus of Plato's writing, which is very large and extends, it was written over many years, the character of Socrates in his dialogues changes. He's quite different from the beginning than he is towards the end of Plato's dialogues. So,
The same can be said about Frodo in Lord of the Rings, though.
okay. Sure.
Well, maybe
I
Socrates
mean, look,
did
I mean,
exist.
it's
and, like,
inevitable, right? You're going to write, if you're going to write about a character over 40 years, don't you think it's going to change? Sorry, Shara.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, well, maybe Socrates like did exist, but he wasn't as like, thoughtful and social as people said, because they were saying how his wife was done with him and he got executed because he was just this crazy guy. So maybe he did have good ideas, but he really didn't write. Well, he said he didn't write them down, and he didn't
Yeah.
have a way to express it because he was just so off the rails all the time. So people would listen to him and maybe come up with things that they thought he would say because of what he had said, like all
Sure.
that stuff.
Well, I mean,
And you're saying
How-
that these aren't even real conversations, right? Like they're ones
How
that like
can they be?
Plato's made up.
how can they be? They can't be word for word. There's no dictation going on here. Well, I'll go back to a point that Shar mentioned a second ago, which is like, if you want to, like, imagine you're at a party and you issue a stupid quote, and then you say, Roosevelt said that. People would be like, oh, really? They'd really believe it, right? I think if you put the words in someone else's mouth, suddenly it becomes much more believable or credible, or it has an influence and impact, right? Right. So, for example, scholars now discover that a lot of the letters of St. Paul in the Bible were not actually written by him. They were written by people who came after him who didn't really like what he had to say, and they wanted to edit it accordingly. And so I could see like people putting words in Socrates' mouth, like, well, Socrates said it. Socrates thought this. Socrates believed this, and so you should believe it too, right?
Was he alive during the writing of Plato's works?
Socrates? I don't think so, because the earliest of Socrates' works is the Apology, which is about his trial. And then he is put to death very soon after that. So I think he was already dead. It's pretty clear.
So yeah, like I think that the Socrates that we know, like Char was saying, like I don't think it's real. Like I think that it's just a tool for Plato and Aristophanes and Xenophon, I think it was, to be able to like write their theories without fear of persecution to them, because they didn't say it.
Have people read about Jesus or whatever? They're like, oh yeah, Jesus said this to this sheep herder. Yeah, I didn't say it. Jesus said it to this guy. So like, not my thoughts. Jesus said it. It's like
there's a very similar dynamic with the Gospels. They were written probably 50 years after Jesus died. So, and there were 20 or 30 of them, and they agreed there's only 4 canonical ones. So similar concerns and similar debates at stake here.
Yeah, it's like you're able to be taken more seriously at work. Like for me, I know, like if someone is like, hey, why are you doing it like that? I'm like, oh, well, my shift leader said that's how we do it, which is usually like true. But then they're like, oh, okay, it's fine. They don't like question me. They're like, oh, someone else said.
Why don't you say, but Jesus told me? And
But
how that goes.
Jesus told me to fucking make a pizza this way. Yeah.
Socrates said it. What I want to say about Socrates is scholars believe that the early Plato the dialogue about his trial is the more authentic Socrates, and that over the course of his life, and by the time we get to the Republic, that's the later Plato, that's less authentic. But why use Socrates? I think probably because there are certain features, which is a great question. I think Joey asked that, like, why do this? Why put all your words in the mouth of Socrates? I'll venture a suggestion, which is that Socrates still represents something, even if his views might change over the course of Plato's writing or his ideas. But for example, scholars pretty much all agree that the idea of the forms, the theory of the forms, that's Plato. That's not Socrates. And yet he puts those in Socrates' mouth. Why continue with this character using the mouthpiece of Socrates over all these dialogues and all these years? I think probably because what Socrates represents. What is essential to Socrates, what we know about Socrates, the original person, historic person, is that he devoted his life to questioning and to questioning other people, because he believed, and this is what got him in trouble, that he would corner people and interrogate them. And he would interrogate them in particular about their values. And he would really put people on the spot if they were not living according to their values. And he revealed that many people were not. And so when Alcibiades complains that he's made to feel shame by Socrates, that sounds to be like what the authentic Socrates tried to do. What I'm trying to say is that while certain things about, while Plato may have attributed certain ideas to Socrates, and he took liberties in doing so, a lot of Socrates remains faithful to the historic figure, meaning that at bottom, he was someone who questioned. He made his life questioning, and he made his life by questioning our values. And whether we are honest with ourselves and whether we pay attention to ourselves. And like in the case of Alcibiades, he knows what is best, but he can't help himself but pursuing other things, right? That was a big problem according to Socrates. People know what the right way is, and yet they habitually let themselves down, right? I want to say one last point, and then I'll get out of this dialogue. But it occurs to me, back on the point of satyr, Aristophanes, when he portrays Socrates in Clouds, he essentially portrays Socrates as a satyr. So Socrates is very baudy. In the play of called Clouds, he is constantly masturbating, sitting on stage, masturbating. So, again, and so it strikes me that Alcibiades calls him a satyr. Socrates is gripped by desire like a satyr, but it is not physical desire, unlike a satyr. And yet, people like Aristophanes could not see the difference. Anyway.
I was reading something that was like one of the reasons Socrates got executed was because of his association with Alcibiades, because Alcibiades was kind of a wacky guy, and Socrates associating himself with him kind of got him in trouble. That's something that I was read about.
I don't know. I have several footnotes about him in my version. I don't know about your version, but he was a general. He was in the army, and I do not know anything about that, Shar. I can't speak to that. So,
okay.
But he was a historic figure.
I mean, Alcibiades does seem kind of like a loose cannon a little bit, like
Totally.
giving into impulses. Probably.
He's also drunker than the others.
Yeah.
Let me finish up the symposium, then we can get into Kant. So all the speeches are done, and then the very last page, whoever our narrator is, I forget his name, says, he stayed on at the party listening, and they went on all night, and they kept drinking. until Socrates and Agathon and Aristophanes are drinking. They were still awake when the sun came up, drinking out of a large cup, which they were passing around between them. And Socrates was still talking, and he was still trying to prove an argument. And the argument being that authors should be able to write both comedy and tragedy. Not a good time, really. And Socrates was an annoying person. That's a common theme. And unsurprisingly, the guys cannot keep their eyes open through his argument, and they're also stinking drunk, so they pass out. And Plato says Socrates looks around him, gets up, goes to the gym, and starts his day. He seems sober, or at least resistant to.
Yeah, wasn't it a thing that Socrates would drink unbelievable amounts, but not get a single, like, not even get even slightly drunk, and everyone was like annoyed by that?
There's something superhuman about him. He doesn't feel physical desires the same way we do. He doesn't feel the cold. Alcibiades talks about him during the battles, not, in bare feet in the snow. And then he seems resistant to the effects of alcohol too. So interesting points that Plato makes about him here towards the end. Clearly, he's trying to get something across about Socrates, that this is a very unique and special and maybe, yes, superhuman person. Okay. All right. Anybody have any last comments or questions about the symposium?
Socrates is an alien.
He's an alien. Could be. My
I'm
translation.
gonna make T-shirts that say Socrates isn't real.
My translation calls him bizarre over and over. He's bizarre. Anybody else? All right, let's talk about Kant. Now, I know what you're thinking. You probably did not enjoy it, but that's okay. I think, as I said to you earlier, I have grown to really like Kant. And of course, I've been teaching for 20 years, so I know how to read him. But I remember when I was your age reading for the first time, and my first reaction was, what the fuck, So we're going to wade into this today and pull apart some of the essential issues. Kant is German. That's probably one of the problems with reading in English, because German, sometimes German translations to English can be kind of difficult to parse, difficult to navigate. I'm not finding his date. Oh, here we go. I have his date, 1724 to 1804. Kant lives. He lives in a place called Königsberg, which today is Kaliningrad. It's in Russia. Königsberg at the time was East Prussia. It was a German port. Well, Meg, I agree with you. I think he's the bomb, frankly. I really like what he has to say. From a philosophical standpoint, I think he's very profound. And
I was like, oh, duh, these already feel like things I kind of already knew, which to me is a good trait sometimes to have in philosophy, where it feels like, oh, like, of course, glad someone put this into words, was kind of how I felt reading it.
I liked his ideas, but the way he wrote, and I suppose this was also like a problem because it was translated, the way he wrote made it feel like he was a computer trying to mimic human speech in a profound way.
Yeah, it like took him 10 sentences to say something that could easily be said in one or two. He used words next to each other that literally did not make sense. Like, I even wrote a quote down because it was so confusing. Hold on, I'm gonna get it because it was so like.
What is your first?
It was number 8. It said, judgment's supposed to be generally valid, but it was in a way where it's like the two word judgments and supposed to were like, like short-circuited my brain trying to read some things.
I posted a video in the Discord that explains some of his ideas a little better if you're interested.
Thank you, Jordan. Abby McShafe, what do you mean it is recursive?
I agreed with what Shar was saying about him kind of talking like a computer. You know, I think he's very afraid to make syllogisms and to like draw a conclusion, establish it, and then draw another conclusion based on that one. So every single thing he says, he has to like over explain it because he feels like people won't believe him otherwise.
Mhm.
And
Or
he'll
he's
kind
like,
of
I
phrase
use
everything
big words, which means I'm smart.
I kind of got that impression as well, and like the reading itself kind of like, I don't know if I'm understanding the concept of like recursive writing. Maybe you could explain that better to me, but I think I felt like he was someone who was writing a paper but like had to have more pages than he actually had. You know,
Yeah.
like he was like filling it up with a lot of like, there was a lot of filler. It felt like and repetition of like the same concept.
Yeah, like he gets to a point and you're like, oh, you could have said that in literally one sentence. What?
But
I
maybe that's our like cultural lens, though. I
Yeah.
mean, this was written so long ago, and like probably most of his concepts have been put into like casual play in everyday like social aspects. So we look at it and we're like, this is duh. Like you could have said that way simpler, but like maybe that's because we have simpler ways to say it now.
Yeah. That makes
Emerald?
sense.
Emerald?
I had asked my German friend about it because I
Mhm.
was like, why does he talk like this or whatever? And he said that he's probably using like really like German specific terminologies and like
Yes.
idioms. Because
Yes.
apparently he's like, we have very interesting way of saying things, and like they probably translated it and it sounds weird. Like imagine translating someone who uses academic text and like big words that really we already have smaller words to describe, and then translating that into another language is basically what reading Kant is apparently, according to him.
And reading Kant in German for Germans is difficult. So,
Oh my God.
by the way, I just realized because this class came together so quickly at the end of the semester, and I did not order books for you all. I just got free ebooks. Your ebook version of Kant is from 1914, the translation. That probably doesn't help matters. If I had been able to get you all a purchased one of an updated translation, that would have helped. But that's the price you pay for getting something free. That said, I've been using this translation for many years, and I like it just fine. So here's just a point I'll remind you of that I said the other day. Stanford Encyclopedia can be useful, with some good summaries about any of this stuff if you are ever stumped. I do think that, Kant is writing during a period of time in Western Europe that is largely dominated intellectually by what we call the scientific revolution. And philosophers and thinkers of all kinds were enamored by modern science, and they were trying to emulate modern science. And so I think that his style, in a way, is trying to do that. But why don't we dive in here? And I think probably, I'm just going to call your attention to the text. Sorry, I'm going to pull it up because I don't think I'm going to share it with you all because I don't like putting texts for everybody to see, but I'm going to pull up your text. If you guys have it, I have it, the book version in front of me, but of course I also have your other version here. At the very beginning, I'm going to quote the very beginning of this is section 1. The judgment of taste is aesthetical. I'm going to read just a few sentences here at the very beginning. What page is that for you all, guys? Is that page 54? Can somebody tell me, please?
Yeah, the very first one.
Is 54?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. In order to decide whether anything is beautiful or not, we refer the representation not by the understanding of the object for cognition, but by the imagination to the subject and its feeling of pleasure or pain. The judgment of taste is therefore not a judgment of cognition and is consequently not logical, but aesthetical, by which we understand that those whose determining ground can be no other than subjective. I'm going to stop there. Just those first few sentences. Some of you seem prepared to translate some things here. Like, what is he trying to say about the aesthetical judgment? What big points has he made here at the very opening?
Can you read it again?
Okay. Section 1, page 54. In order to decide whether anything is beautiful or not, like when we make a decision, when we make a statement, something's beautiful, whether we judge it, we refer the representation not by the understanding of the object, but by the imagination to the subject. And
So it's like
vain.
we judge by something how beautiful it is based on how our brain sees it, not how it actually is.
Good. Beauty is not an objective property. It is not a property in an object. Beauty is subjective. The judgment of taste is therefore not a judgment of cognition. It's consequently not logical, but aesthetical. Yeah, that's pretty much the big claim here at the very beginning. It is subjective. An aesthetical judgment refers not to an object, it refers to a subjective state or a subjective experience. Okay. Let's go to the next section. He says that the judgment of taste, by the way, judgment of taste, judgment of beauty, same thing, aesthetical judgment. These are all the same. They're all interchangeable terms. Judgment of taste, I'm just going to do it here in the taste equals judgment of beauty equals aesthetical judgment. They're all the same. Okay. He says in section 2 now that this judgment is disinterested. What does that mean?
Didn't it have to do with kind of a lack of personal investment or reasoning towards what it does as well? Like, I interpreted it as both, you have to be like far removed, like it can't be like, oh, this vessel is beautiful because it was like made by my girlfriend. But then also it doesn't, wait, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, it has to do with kind of objectivity in beauty.
Good, 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 good. Anybody else want to supplement what Meg said? In what sense is an aesthetical judgment disinterested? What does that mean?
I think he was talking about how like when you think of something as beautiful, that's the entire thought. That's all that it is. Versus like if you make a different type of judgment, there's some sort of like an end goal, like you want something out of it.
Good. Excellent. I like that. You know, I realized I forgot to highlight something else from section 1. Not only is it subjective, he points out that it involves pleasure, but it's not the same kind of pleasure as, say, I see a beautiful flower versus I see a big piece of chocolate cake, right? I view the chocolate cake in an interested fashion because I'm fucking hungry and that'll taste good, right? It benefits me. But I don't view and I don't enjoy or appreciate the rose in the same way. I appreciate the beautiful rose in a disinterested fashion. Oh, there's a beautiful rose. Wow, that's amazing. And
yeah, like you want something from it.
You don't want something from it, and you don't necessarily want to do something with it. You don't want to monetize it or market it. You just want to behold it and appreciate it. Okay? I think that's good. Anything else you guys want to say about that? He also distinguishes early on here between the pleasant, the good, and the beautiful. This is section do. I'm looking at section 3 now. And actually, here's a quote in section 3. This is second paragraph, middle. Pleasantness. Sorry, section 5. I'm so sorry, guys. Section 5. Section 5. This is the middle of that second paragraph. Pleasantness concerns irrational animals. Also, right? My chickens take pleasure in eating cicadas. Good for them. Pleasantness concerns irrational animals, but beauty only concerns humans. That is animal, but still rational. Not merely qua rational, but qua animal also. And the good concerns every rational being in general. The good has to do with moral intuition. Humans are uniquely moral. That's what Kant's saying. Humans are uniquely moral. Animals are not. A fox does not stop to spare a baby rabbit out of moral goodness. I have not seen that happen. Humans are often assholes, but we also have this moral impulse in us, right? That is uniquely human. The pleasant is not uniquely human. His point is that the moral sense in humans, the moral urge, is connected to reason. But what's interesting about the aesthetical judgment, the judgment of beauty, is that it appeals to us as physical, as human beings in our physical nature. The good appeals to us as rational beings. The beautiful appeals to us as humans in our physical nature. Okay, I'm going to move on a little more, and then I'll pause for some questions. Okay, listen, this is where it gets funky. Okay, the experience of the beautiful is subjective. It is not a property. Beauty is not a property of an object. When I see a beautiful tree, beauty is not a property of that object. Here disagrees with Plato. But it is a subjective, is something on the subjective side of that experience. But then he tells us this in section, this is the very end of section 6. He will therefore, middle of that second paragraph, he will therefore speak of the beautiful as if beauty were a characteristic of the object and the judgment logical. Although it is only aesthetical and involves merely a reference to the representation of the object to the subject, for it has a similarity to a logical judgment that we can presuppose its validity for everyone. Now, that looks dense. I'm going to read it again because I'm going to, this is dense, but it's really important. I want to see who gets this. He will therefore speak of the beautiful as if beauty, by he's like any person who experiences beautiful. He will speak of it as if beauty were a characteristic of the object and the judgment logical, although it is only aesthetical and involves merely a reference to the representation of the object to the subject, for it has similarity to a logical judgment that we can presuppose its validity for everyone. Anybody have an idea what's going on there?
I suppose what he's saying is like beauty is not a inherent object or inherent quality of an object. It is a perceived quality of an object, and therefore beauty is wholly subjective.
Well, we
and
got
not
that
s-
far.
and not something that is specifically built by or something that generally is specifically built for the object, if that makes sense.
You got half of it right. Joey?
He's kind of like negating what Plato says about the form of things. Like, it doesn't exist in his mind. It's only a concept that exists when we actually like see something and we think it's beautiful. It's a completely human and internal concept, and therefore it's like 100% subjective. Like, you can't have an objective idea of beauty.
Here is an example of an aesthetical statement. This rose is beautiful. Fair warning, I'm going to use this statement a lot. It's very useful. It's very important that it is this rose. I'll deal with that later. This rose is beautiful. Just look at that. Just look at that. You know what people don't usually say? What people don't usually say is, this rose is beautiful for me. People usually say, that's a fucking beautiful sunset. That is a beautiful car. That is a beautiful house. That is a beautiful painting. You know what they don't say? That is a beautiful sunset for me. That is a beautiful car for me. That is a beautiful house for me. They just say, that is beautiful. What is going on here, people?
I think those are usually things that most people will agree on, or will find normal if a person does find them beautiful. Or for example, if I'm like walking down the street and I'm like, oh my God, that's such a beautiful cicada. People are gonna be like,
And no
what?
one
Like,
ever.
usually I would be like, I think that's such a beautiful cicada.
Well,
Like,
it's
it's something
imputed.
that isn't supposed to be.
It's implied.
Yeah.
Joey, you got your hand up. Okay. Emerald?
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna agree with that. Because like if it's something that everyone or society deems as like beautiful, people would say that is beautiful, like a sunset or a rose. Well, that's more of a conclusion I came to when you said that. Like I realized that. But when it's something that like not everyone sees as objectively beautiful, like okay, this is like a stupid example, but I'm talking to my friends about a fictional character. I'm like, oh, I think he's beautiful. You like when you know something's not like everyone's gonna agree with you, you gotta put the I think or to me, so you don't like not necessarily get attacked, but like the little backlash or like the combo, like oh really, like okay, and even at that, it's still like oh, you know what I mean?
Good. Yes. Yes. All right. Here's the point, everybody. I'm putting in the chat. Aesthetic judgments are universally subjective. Or, yes. Wait a minute. Hang on. Hang on. Sorry. Hang on. I don't like the way I phrase that. I'm going to rephrase it. So scratch that. Can I delete? No, I can't. Okay. They are subjective and universal. Okay. Emerald, you want to say something else?
Sorry, I had just taken a bite.
All right.
I was also going to say that I realized that so kind of subconscious ways things are established in society, that I think that things being seen as beautiful in terms of, for me, I'm thinking in terms of like beauty, like what's the word? Beauty standards.
Mhm.
If you say something is beautiful all the time or refer to certain things or aspects as beautiful, people as a whole then realize and accept that. So like I don't know when people started saying that, or at least in the English language, people started saying that, but I feel like that has developed from that. If you consistently say that, and subconsciously that puts out to the world, or at least in the community, that this is beautiful because we all say this is beautiful. And then you have to go with the status quo saying, okay, that is a thing when I see it that is beautiful because society tells me it's beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. At this point, Kant is not talking about social judgments at this point or social influence. He's just making an observation. This is one of the things I really like about this book. He just looks at this and he's like, you know what? Aesthetical judgments are weird. I know they're not objective. But they're phrased like objective statements. Let me give you another example of an objective statement. The sky is blue. Damn it, I misspelled it. The sky is blue.
Excuse me, I'm colorblind. The sky is green.
Okay. The water is wet. How about that? Maybe we can agree on that. You know,
That's also a debate.
fucking hell. Okay, everybody, just work with me here. It's Friday. Come on. The water is wet. The sky is blue. The rose is beautiful. They have the same form. Kant says, what is going on here? I know aesthetic judgments are not objective. Wetness is a property of water, in water. You know, greenness is a property of that tree. You know, hardness is a property of the bark of that tree. But I know beauty is not a property of that tree, okay? So it's not objective, it's subjective, and yet it is universal. Because when I say something is beautiful, I'm proposing that it is. Okay, Joey.
So I had a question about what you were saying, like, or what Kant was saying rather, about those like larger like societal objectifications of beauty. Like, is he like saying that's wrong, or is he just kind of like trying to point out like a fallacy in like speech, like you were saying, like people?
I think he's saying something, he's noticing something here in I just think I think the debate over the social genesis of beauty is very far from his radar right now. I don't think that's on his radar at all. Right now, he's just analyzing the nature of these aesthetical judgments, trying to understand what is unique to their nature, you know. So let me put that on the back burner because I want to get through a couple things here, but we only have 15 minutes, but we can definitely talk about that on Monday. But like I said, I just have a couple things I really need to accomplish. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to show you this. This is the passage here, section 6. Okay. And again, we have just explained this, but I want you to see the sentence again. Here is the sentence I've been reading. He will therefore speak of the beautiful as if beauty were a characteristic of the object. Stop there. Notice, look, as if. A judgment of beauty speaks of beauty as if it were an objective trait. That rose is beautiful. Suggests beauty is a trait of that object. But that's not really the intent of the statement. An aesthetic judgment speaks of beauty as if it were a characteristic of the object. Although it is only aesthetical and involves merely a reference of the representation of the object to the subject. So what's really going on here is when you say something is beautiful, you speak as if it were an object, a property of that object, but it's not. And what is universal? What is universal is this. It's the experience. So here's what's going on. When you say, this is a beautiful sunset, what you are really saying in this sentence, according to Kant, is if everyone could be right here where I am right now, seeing this sunset in this way at this moment, they would all fucking agree. This is beautiful. This rose is beautiful. Again, it's indirectly referring to the experience of this singular rose. And when I say this rose is beautiful, what I'm really saying is if everyone could be here right now with me at this moment, seeing this rose from this perspective, they would agree it's beautiful. So technically it's a conditional statement. Unwittingly, judgments of aesthetical judgments are conditional. If you took your languages, you know, French and Spanish, you would know that refers to the if statements, right? If everyone were here, they would agree. It's not factually universal, it's conditionally universal. I like what he's saying. I find it really unique and persuasive. I don't know what you all think, but I hope you understand I guess what I like about Kant is that he is noticing that aesthetical judgments are unique. They're not like this cake is tasty, right? The sky is blue. They look the same, they sound the same, but there's something very different going on. There's something uniquely human about the aesthetical judgment. I have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to dig a little deeper, and then Monday we can start to pull this apart because there's a couple other points I want to make. Okay, here's the next thing. So I'm going to list it. Aesthetical judgments are subjective. They are universal. They are disinterested. They are also singular. This is something I think I like this the most. Who knows what that means to say that they are singular?
Then it's an experience that can't be replicated.
Yeah, it comes up in section 8. Here's an example. This is not an aesthetical judgment. Okay, you ready? Here, I put it in the chat. This is not an aesthetical judgment according to him. Roses are beautiful. That is not. That is not an aesthetical judgment.
So that's okay from his perspective to say something like that. Generally, roses are beautiful because you're talking about like a generalized social concept of roses being beautiful. Or am I misunderstanding completely?
No. I know what you're asking. I'm having trouble. Let me just say this, and then I'll backtrack. This is an example. Here's an example of an aesthetical judgment. This rose is beautiful. Because of what you said a minute ago, Joey, is his view, which is that it's based in a given experience, a singular experience. That's beauty. So what does it mean when you're saying roses are beautiful, where you're applying it, you're not using it justifiably. You're not using it as a justifiable aesthetic characteristic at that point. You're using it, what he says, you're using it as a logical category, right? Like saying like cars are fat.
It just really confuses me though, because I get that it's a different statement. This rose is beautiful, roses are beautiful, but like, I don't know. I feel like Kant broke my brain with this one because it doesn't make any sense.
I get it. Let me make one more point, and then I think this will help you guys understand it. He says its universality is based on no concept. This is the other way of saying there is no concept of beauty. This is section 8. Okay, listen, there's no concept of beauty. Two things I want to point out here. This is where he breaks with Plato. There is no concept, there's no idea of beauty. Beauty is always instantiated, according to him. But it's also not something that can be communicated.
It has to be felt.
It has to be experienced. I cannot stand in front of this incredible sunset and call my wife up and say, hey, this sunset's gorgeous. She won't get it. And I can't describe it to her sufficiently. I could say, well, there's little hints of orange and there's a butterfly flying by my nose. No, she's got to be there with me to experience it. This is His broader point is this: beauty is incommunicable. When you say there's no concept, there's a concept of greenness. There's a concept of roughness to the feel. There's a concept of wetness. There's no concept of beauty, according to him.
With each person, it's so different. You can't like have one describing thing for it.
It's not subject. Here's the point, Char. This is incredibly important. It is not subjective in the sense that it varies, because we all agree. If we all see that rose in the same vantage point, we will all agree, oh my God, that's a beautiful rose. It will be consistent.
But that's a concept that's inside of like your brain. It hasn't happened. Like it's a completely theoretical thing. Like there's no physical way to get every single person to
No, that's true.
that. Like there's no way to like, and especially if you're talking about like from Kant's perspective, who's using like science, like you're saying they were like scientific.
Joey, I was using the word conditional. It's conditional. If everyone could be here, they would agree. Now, what is he doing, Joey? He is saying, listen, I think this is what we mean by the aesthetical judgment. I think this is what we understand. What Kant's trying to do is he's trying to, as I think Meg was saying it early on here, he's trying to put into words what we really do already think about the aesthetical. You know, like, yeah, when we say this rose is beautiful, we say that, but we don't really believe it's a property of the rose. We do suppose it is universal, but you're right, Joey. We can't say if everybody's seeing it at this point. No, it's if they could be here and see it. Okay. I don't know what emerald means. Sorry, talking Python.
Coding.
Oh, all right. Then I give up. I can't talk coding.
Don't worry. That's basically what Python is, what you were just saying, or like how to describe something. If it's this, then this, and under the conditions of this, it is that. And yeah.
Don't worry so much about trying to understand what he means that there's no content of beauty. I think the bigger issue is, or no concept of beauty. I think the bigger issue is his claim that beauty is incommunicable. Here is the claim he's making. Like, you can't really ever fully say, if you have experienced something beautiful, unless that person is there with you, you cannot ever fully explain why. I can't call my wife up and say this sunset was beautiful for these reasons. It's never going to be a purely intellectual experience. You have to be physically present for it. And I'm going to call your attention to this passage. This is in section 8. I'm going to switch over so I can show it to you all. And we're winding down here, everybody, just so you know. Section 8. Okay. I'm looking at this paragraph. If we judge. Here. Okay. Everybody see this? Middle of page 68. If we judge objects merely according to concepts, then all representation of beauty is lost, right? Beauty cannot be a purely intellectual thing, in other words. Thus, there can be no rule according to which anyone is to be forced to recognize anything as beautiful. We cannot press upon others by the aid of any reasons or fundamental propositions our judgment that a coat, a house, or a flower is beautiful. I cannot persuade another. They've got to be there to see it. We wish to submit the object to our own eyes as if the satisfaction in it depended on sensation. And yet, if we then call the object beautiful, we believe that we speak with a universal voice. And we claim the assent of everyone, right? We claim the assent of everyone, although on the contrary, all private sensation can only decide for the observer himself and his satisfaction. That is a pretty essential statement there in the middle of page 68. That's what I was trying to say, the example of calling my wife up and telling her, I cannot convey to her or fully persuade her or fill her with the aesthetical experience of the beauty of that sunset. She's got to see it. Okay. Let me hit on one last point and then we will disperse. So aesthetical judgments are singular, subjective, universal, disinterested, and there's one more feature they have. This is section 10 and 11.
So is that the only reason why roses are beautiful isn't an aesthetic judgment, because we're talking about more than one rose?
Yeah, it's got to be experiential and singular. It's got to be that single rose that hit you. Well, I mean,
I get it. It's just, I feel like it's like needlessly complex, you know?
We can play around with this on Monday, you know, but try to think of a beautiful rose, you know, and, you know, you probably can draw something beautiful, but it's not, you know, it's not the same as seeing a singular rose in the morning dappled in dew when it's about to bloom, you know, and then it's going to be dead in 3 days. There's something, I do hear him saying there is a bigger claim here. I think I need to think harder about it, and maybe you guys can think about it too, but you know, it is experiential. You're getting it, you're understanding it. We can prosecute this deeper, but on Monday, let me finish this point about purposiveness. Well, aesthetic judgments discern purposiveness without purpose. This is weird. They recognize design, or the imprint of design, without recognizable function. That's another way of putting it. I tend to speak about purposiveness without purpose. What is this all about? Well, this is now section 10, the very end of 10. He says, but an object or state of mind or even an action is called purposive, although its possibility does not necessarily presuppose representation of a purpose, merely because its possibility can be explained and conceived by us only so far as we assume for its ground of causality, according to purposes, i.e. a will, which would have so disposed it according to the representation of a certain rule. There can be then purposiveness without purpose, so far as we do not place the causes of this form in a will, and yet can only make the explanation of its possibility intelligible to ourselves by deriving it from a will. Ugh, that's a mouthful. This is the end of section 10. What's the point? An aesthetic judgment. Oh, I see your comment, Chiao. Let me just get this out, and then I'll take a look at that. An aesthetic judgment, when you recognize something as beautiful, you're recognizing design without understanding what it's designed for. That's what he wants to say. When you see a rose, you see beautiful design, but it's not designed for any particular function that you can tell, or certainly not for any, you know, it's your appreciation. You appreciate the design for design's sake. That's the point. Yeah. I don't disagree with what you say, Chiao. I think that's fine. I think you could add that to the conditional statement, right? That's implied, which is if everyone could be here to see this rose in this moment with me in the same way that I am, you know, then they would agree. But again, it gets back to this indisputable claim. You cannot dispute this, everybody. We don't say this rose is beautiful for me. This house is beautiful for me. This person is beautiful for me. No, we say this rose is beautiful. This sunset is beautiful. This house is beautiful. We lay claim. This is the word that Shar was getting at earlier in that difficult quote. There is a claim or a suggestion of universal validity. We presume, when we say make aesthetical judgments, we presume that they are universally valid. And there's no way around that, y'all. There's no way. That's the way we use them. So what's going on? Kant is trying to make sense of that. What's going on is that there's a hidden conditional statement there. It's subjective and universal. So it's subjectively universal, okay? So let me just hit on this last point here about purposiveness, and then we can break. The point is, the judgment of taste, this is a quote, has nothing at its basis but the form of purposiveness. We recognize design. We recognize that it is designed for some kind of end, but we don't care about what the end is, because he wants to separate aesthetics from function, right? The aesthetical judgment is disinterested. He wants to separate aesthetics from function. So we recognize and we admire purposiveness, but we could care less about the purpose, or we don't know the purpose or end. All right.
It seems like such a strange departure from what you were saying about philosophers in his time, like how they were so obsessed with science and like wanting to kind of make that work together with their theories, because what he's doing is just kind of like, fuck it. Like, he doesn't care about the purpose of the aesthetic of the rose. Like, why is it pretty?
Well, you know, I mean, there are later philosophers who are going to say something similar, like Heidegger, which is basically like, you know, very often artistic objects, they, you know, we treat them differently. We just do. Like, we don't treat them like a book or a chair, you know. Now, listen, I understand in the 20th century, we get this conflation of functional design. And there, for a lot of philosophers of art, this is a big problem. Kant is not going to understand functional design. He sees them completely apart, okay? Artistic objects are just on they're a domain apart. That's what they are. We don't treat them like functional objects. We don't recognize them like functional objects. We admire them. We take pleasure in them, but it's not physical pleasure. There's no physical interest in them. We recognize design and purpose, but we don't know what it's for, right? And even if we did, we admire it apart from that, right? So, and I think what you say is right, Joey. I mean, what he's talking about here, you know, the aesthetic is not scientifically quantifiable. That's definitely what he's saying. Like, this is unique. This is a unique element of human experience. And it cannot be reduced to scientific terms. It cannot be understood scientifically. I'm going to put it this way. It's almost quasi-religious. Now, Kant was a religious person, but he doesn't bring God into it, okay? But when he says this language here about purposiveness kind of reeks with religious insinuations, right? I could put it very bluntly and say that when I say this rose is beautiful, I see purposiveness without knowing the purpose. That is, in a way, it's saying I see the handprint of God's design in this intricate rose. And I haven't a clue why it is designed this way or how, right? It is almost a quasi-religious awe. But it's not religious, okay? I'm just using this as an analogy, but it's not religious, but it's almost there. Okay. I'm going to leave it there for today. If you have questions, write them down. Monday, we'll dive in. We'll dive deeper. We'll probably go for about an hour on Monday, deal with some more of Kant. You got your papers right over the weekend, okay, and Monday. And I'd be happy to chat with anybody now if they want. All right. All right. See you later, guys. Have a good one. And I'll
Thank you.
Monday, 1
Bye,
o'clock
take
again. No
care.
meeting. Bye.
For just one thing, I'm not going to be able to make Monday's class because I have to be at my mother's inauguration into her new position.
Okay.
So sorry about
Well, it'll be recorded.
that. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. See ya.
Yeah, I want to talk about the essay.
Yes. All right. Well, let me see if anybody has any quick questions. Anybody have any quick questions? No?
I'm not talk about the essays.
Also?
I'll save my long questions for Monday. I just
Hey, okay, whatever. It can be if you want.
Make sure to write them down.
I was just going to try and get the short questions out of the way first, so that